All right, let's dive in. The global system of trade. The one that shaped our economy for decades? Well, it is facing a massive challenge right now. Tensions are running super high, the rulebook is being thrown into question, and today we're going to break down a really fascinating analysis of this threat and take a look at Europe's game plan to handle it all. We have to start with this one statement that just puts the whole conflict in perfect focus.
Wow. This one sentence really sets the stage, doesn't it? The very country that was the main architect of the modern trading system is now seen as its biggest threat. This isn't just some small disagreement. We're talking about a fundamental challenge to the entire global economic order. So what's the argument even about?
To really get the response, you first have to understand the attack itself. The U.S. has been making its case based on a pretty specific view of how trade works. But, as this analysis points out, that view, well, it might be fundamentally flawed.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting, because this slide breaks down the core misunderstanding. The U.S. position is intensely focused on these bilateral deficits, the one-on-one trade score between two countries, like the U.S. and China. But economists argue this totally misses the bigger picture. The reality is that a country's overall trade balance, its aggregate balance, is actually determined by its national savings and investment habits, not by its trade policy with just one partner. It's kind of like obsessing over one play in a football game instead of looking at the final score.
So what if this whole disagreement just spirals completely out of control? What are the actual consequences? We hear this term trade war thrown around all the time, but what would that actually mean for the economy? Let's look at the numbers.
This is the question at the heart of it all, right? The paper actually runs a simulation of what a full-scale trade war would look like, where all the major countries start slapping massive tariffs on each other. And honestly, the results are pretty staggering.
For the European Union, the permanent hit to its GDP would be around 4%. Now, let me be super clear about this. That is not a one-time dip. It's a permanent reduction in economic output year after year after year. Just a massive, sustained shock to the whole system.
And this slide just perfectly illustrates how huge that number really is. A 4% loss, that's on the same scale as the hit we took from the Great Recession back in 2008-2009, and we all remember how that felt. The analysis shows this isn't a game. The potential economic damage is real, and it's severe for absolutely everyone involved, including the US and China.
Of course, none of these trade tensions are happening in a vacuum. There's a reason these arguments are finding an audience. For years now, there's been this growing public skepticism about globalization, and the paper really digs into why that is.
Let's look at what people are worried about. A lot of folks feel that while globalization creates winners, it also creates a lot of losers by making inequality worse and causing job losses in certain industries. And all of that can lead to this general distrust of being so open to the world, a feeling of being left vulnerable and unprotected from these huge global forces.
But here's where the analysis offers a really critical insight. While trade definitely plays a role, it seems the rise of these populist movements is being fueled even more by a much broader sense of economic insecurity, especially in the countries that got hit the hardest by the 2008 financial crisis. The big takeaway here is that if you just blame trade, you're missing the bigger picture of this widespread economic anxiety.
So, with all that on the table, the economic risks, the political climate, how should Europe respond? Well, the paper doesn't just point out the problem, it lays out a very clear three-pronged strategy to defend the system.
Okay, so the game plan is this mix of strength and diplomacy. Let's break it down. Step 1, you retaliate, firmly and proportionally against these unilateral tariffs. You have to show that there's a cost to breaking the rules. Step 2, and this happens at the exact same time, is to put a serious offer on the table for real negotiations to address legitimate issues, like subsidies or intellectual property. And finally, step 3 is to have a plan B ready. If the talks fail, you form a club of countries to work around the roadblocks and just keep the system going.
Now, let's see how this all builds into a new, forward-looking vision. The paper argues that beyond just reacting to the crisis, Europe can actually reshape the whole purpose of trade agreements for the 21st century. This is such a powerful idea. In the worst-case scenario, if we end up in a global trade war, a strong network of trade deals basically acts like an insurance policy. The simulation shows that having these agreements already in place could cushion the economic blow for the countries involved by as much as 1/3. It's like a buffer against global chaos.
But the vision gets even bolder. The paper recommends that future trade agreements shouldn't just be about economics. They should be used as leverage for the global good.
A key proposal is to make signing a trade deal conditional on the partner country actually ratifying and implementing the Paris Climate Agreement.
And that same principle would apply to financial fairness too. Partners would also have to adopt the global plan to fight corporate tax evasion. The whole point is to make sure that opening up trade doesn't just create a race to the bottom on taxes, but instead promotes a level and fair playing field for everybody.
So this all leads to a final, pretty provocative question. The paper leaves us wondering if the very tools of global commerce, which are so often seen as being just about profit, can be repurposed to tackle our biggest shared challenges. It's a powerful vision for the future of globalization, one that could transform it from a source of anxiety into a potential force for real progress.